Alrighty, how's it going, everybody? Welcome back to Engineering Major Philosophy Minor. I hope you guys had a nice, heartwarming Merry Christmas this year. If you live in a state like California or New York where the lockdown restrictions are relatively severe in comparison to other states across the country, I hope you guys had the opportunity to kind of transcend that and visit your family and friends in the safest way possible and enjoy their company, maybe have a nice dinner, maybe open some good presents, and yeah, just generally have a good Christmas. So, in today's video, I am going to react to a little bit of this clip from Joe Biden giving a COVID-19 briefing here. And we're basically going to tear it to shreds. Where I'm going to talk about how no news can ever be good news for Democrats. I'm going to talk about how Joe Biden is putting forth a plan that doesn't really align with science. And in terms of science, I don't mean anything grandiose. What I simply mean is just common sense, looking at the available data and kind of judging for yourself whether or not what Joe Biden is saying has makes any common sense at all. So to be fair, Trump did do something over the last few days that, in my opinion, was pretty upsetting. So we're going to be even-handed with him. And after this segment, I'm going to make another segment reacting to President Trump. Now, again, I voted for Trump. I support Trump. In this particular case, he just did something that I disagree with, and so I'll point out that he did something disagreeable, at least in my opinion. However, that being said, we have spent the last 4 years of the mainstream media and other Democrats basically praising Democrats of being able to do no wrong, basically being as good as Jesus Christ, and every single thing that they say or do is like walking on water, whereas anything that conservatives or Trump says is the penultimate evil, worthy of being called Hitlerian and Satanism. So the unfortunate thing for the mainstream media is now if something goes wrong with Joe Biden, they can't call it out, as they've spent the last 4 years saying that Trump is literally the root of all evil. But if evil exists, then when Trump isn't around, what happened, guys? So anyway, let's go ahead and get into reacting to this video. And giving some commentary. All right, let's go ahead and see what Sleepy Joe's got to say.
February. Turning this around is going to take time. We might not see improvement until we're well into March, as it will take time for our COVID response plan to begin to produce visible progress.
Okay, Biden, so you're saying that it's going to take until March, basically the time period over which the spike will probably be over already, for your plan to take effect. So why then would we institute your plan? Like, why wouldn't we just keep giving people the vaccine and do the best we can, open up, and just kind of get through it?
The second thing to know, the Trump administration's plan to distribute vaccines is falling behind, far behind. We're grateful to the companies, the doctors, the scientists, the researchers, the clinical trial participants, and Operation Warp Speed for developing the vaccines quickly. But as I long feared and warned, the effort to distribute and administer the vaccine is not progressing as it should.
God, Joe, when does anything the government does ever progress as it should? It literally never has. Here we have a president who was mocked by every Democrat and every media institution, basically saying that it was going to be impossible to get a vaccine before the end of the year. And what happened? We got a vaccine before the end of the year. Now, does that mean that the government's responsible wholly for creation of the vaccine? No, absolutely not. But if it wasn't for the government simply promising to basically buy a bunch of units of the vaccine, then they would not have taken on financial liability and financial risk to develop a vaccine in that time period. Now, I just want to mention for a second that it's always doom and gloom with Democrats. Oh, we'll never get a vaccine, and then we get a vaccine, and then, well, it's, we don't know if it's effective, and then we see the data and it's effective, and then, we don't know if, well, now it's not getting distributed fast enough. Well, yeah, I mean, these these things are complicated, right? It's not as if you just substitute Trump for Joe Biden and then everything's, suddenly the machine has rid itself of every single inefficiency. I mean, the Democrats act like, Trump is literally the source of every single inefficiency possible.
A few weeks ago, Trump administration suggested that 20 million Americans could be vaccinated by the end of December.
Listen to that. The Trump administration suggested. So that means that it's a goal, right? We may not accomplish that goal. We may exceed that goal. We're going to set a goal.
With only a few days left in December, we've only vaccinated a few million so far.
So now Joe Biden's trying to say that simply by virtue of having the goal and maybe not meeting it exactly, that undoes all the good of the millions of people that have already been vaccinated.
And the pace of the vaccination program is moving now, if it continues to move as it is now, it's going to take years, not months, to vaccinate the American people.
Okay, so here Joe is now switching the goalposts, right? Because now he's not relying on the standard of the 20 million that was put forth as a goal. He's talking about vaccinating the entire American people. Well, Joe, we don't need to vaccinate 300 million people, right? You don't need to. Because not 300 million people are going to die if they don't get vaccinated, and not even 300 million people are going to have to go to the hospital if they don't get vaccinated.
Which brings me to the third thing every American should know.
Let's hear
The
it.
Biden-Harris administration will spare no effort to make sure people get vaccinated. I've laid
The Trump administration is already doing it.
out 3 challenges in our first 100 days. One of them is ensuring that 100 million shots have been administered by the end of the first 100 days.
Okay, so, Joe Biden is doing this convenient little nice thing to say, 100 million after 100 days. So let's talk a little bit about the science behind why it needs to be 100 million. Now, when I say science, I'm not talking about going into an extensive research program and trying to figure this out. I'm talking about just looking at common sense numbers that both you and I have access to, and we can give ourselves an idea of how many people really, really need to get vaccinated. So guys, let's go ahead and take a look at who really needs to get vaccinated. Here is the U.S. population of the United States by sex and age as of July 1. This is from Statista.com. I'm going to assume that this is a decent source. It says the estimated population was apparently approximately 328.2 million in 2019. That is a number, in my opinion, that is close enough for me, at least close enough for engineering work. So here we've got the number of residents in millions along the x-axis, and then on the y-axis we have the age in years. So what that means is, let's say 45 to 49, this 10.09 number, that is the number of males in millions that are in the age bracket of 45 to 49. That's 10.09 million. So what I did was I copied these numbers into a spreadsheet and I started to do some math. Now there might be some small errors in here just from copying the numbers down, but as you can see, my total US population comes to 328.2 million as they cite in the source behind me here. So I think that that's pretty good. So what we're going to do is we're going to assume that the US population that's at high risk for COVID-19 death is age 65 or above. So what that means is we're going to add up basically all these numbers right here, and that comes to 54.07 million. So right off the bat, you can see that you do not need to vaccinate 100 million people in order to prevent a majority of serious complications or deaths. Now, let me put a disclaimer here. I'm not a doctor. I'm just operating based on my own observation and my own common sense. Now, the next question is, well, how many of this 54 million would actually die or have serious complications, right? Because we know that the death rate isn't 100%. So what I've done is I've looked up the San Diego cases and deaths and computed the death rate. You can get that data from right here and right here. You guys can pause your video and go back and forth and see if the numbers line up. I've copied this here. So let's look at the death rates here. Basically, until you get to age 50 to 59, that's when you actually encounter a number that's really statistically significant, close to 1%. But then, of course, above that, a little bit more than double the death rate, but it's still only 1.94% of the people. Now, of course, in the 80 plus range, we've got 15.1% of people that are expected to die from coronavirus or coronavirus related illnesses or complications. So let's go ahead and be conservative, and we'll just assume that everyone over the age of 65, 15% of them are going to die if they get coronavirus. Now, obviously, we know that's not true, but again, we're trying to do an approximate worst case scenario. So I'll pull up the calculator, and I'll take 54.07, remember there's a million at the end of this, times 0.1512. Lo and behold, we get the number of 8.2 million. So in reality, if you could target the vaccine to the perfect number of people who were, for sure going to die if they got coronavirus. Obviously, you don't know for sure, but we can get an estimate of the number of people that are really, really at super high risk that absolutely would die unless they were vaccinated. It's only about 8.2 million people. So why is Joe talking about we need to get every American vaccinated, or we need to get 100 million people vaccinated? You simply don't need to do that, right? Now, the reason why this is important, well, let's go ahead and keep watching the video, and then we're going to touch on the reason why this number is very important relative to Joe Biden's plan.
Congress provides the funding.
There it is. If Congress provides the funding, Congress has provided all the funding. We spent so much money this year on trying to provide people assistance because of government-required shutdowns, and then we just passed another stimulus bill, and now, related to the video I'm going to make about Trump, they want to put even more money into the stimulus bill. Now, let me ask you guys this. Do you guys want to spend more of your taxpayer money, or have your kids spend a ton of taxpayer money in order to implement in order to implement Joe Biden's plan of vaccinating 100 million people by March or whatever? He doesn't even really give a timeline. But do you really want to put all that money into Joe Biden's plan when you know that not even 100 million people need to get vaccinated for us to get through this? And by the way, as people are getting vaccinated, other people are getting the virus and surviving the virus. So that reduces the number of people that need to be vaccinated even further.
We'd be able to meet this incredible goal. It would take ramping up 5 to 6 times the current pace to 1 million shots a day.
So here Joe Biden is actually just completely talking out of his ass, because he thinks that if you just hand a machine that's producing, that's producing vaccines, or you just hand a nurse that's administering vaccines a stack of $100 bills, that all of a sudden that they're just going to be able to do the work, 50 times or 5 to 6 times faster, as he suggests. This is the issue with all of Democrats' plans, is they assume that there is this unidimensional solution to a really, really complicated problem. In this case, if you give companies just a bunch of government money, they still need to expand their production line. Once they have gotten all the machinery and the equipment and maybe needed to build a new building and stuff like that, now they've got this nice big production line, now they need to test that out. They need to make sure that the vaccines coming out of that are the same chemical composition as the other vaccines. They need to make sure that that stuff is safe. They need to staff that up. then they need to get all the vaccines on the trucks, then they need to deliver them to the nurses. And let's say that a nurse, let's say that a nurse is literally, she's got a Congo line of people, and she's got a bunch of needles in a bin, and she's just going, vaccinate, 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 vaccinate. You can only issue a certain number of vaccines in a reasonable working day, unless you want these people to be working 24 hours. So then you're going to have to institute multiple shifts, probably up to 3 shifts per day, so that people can take breaks. And so now that I've run through all that, do you guys really think that simply just throwing a bunch of cash, a bunch of your taxpayer money at Joe Biden is going to make this happen any faster than it already is? If you think that, then you really need to have your common sense take a little check for a second, because this is not how it works. You can't just simply throw money at things and then have them magically get better.
But even with that improvement, even if we boost the speed of vaccinations to 1 million shots a day, it will still take months to have the majority of the United States population vaccinated.
So here we go again with the doom and gloom. And on top of that, so let's just take it one at a time. Here's the doom and gloom. Joe Biden. Well, even if you guys spend all your tax money on my plan, we won't even be able to get a majority of Americans vaccinated. And that means that, everything, the world's collapsing. It's so frustrating. Okay, first off, the doom and gloom itself is frustrating. Let's go down the list to the next thing. The next thing is to get a majority of Americans vaccinated. Well, I just showed you guys the numbers. A majority of Americans do not need to get vaccinated. In fact, a small percentage of Americans at high risk for dying need to get vaccinated, and the rest of us will probably be okay. And by the way, once you've vaccinated all the people who are at super high risk, that doesn't mean that you have to stop vaccinating. It just means that other people can get the vaccine if they want to or if they don't.
I've directed my team to prepare a much more aggressive effort with more federal involvement and leadership to get things back on track.
Awesome, Joe. So we're going to hand you a bunch of taxpayer money so that you can just pack the room full of more and more government and federal spend and federal bureaucracy and, crony politician bureaucrats. Yeah, okay. Thanks for nothing, Joe. So that said, guys, I'm going to go ahead and end the video. Comment below if you agree or disagree. I do appreciate all the comments, even if they're in disagreement. Like, share, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Stay tuned for the next segment where we're going to break down the thing that Trump said, which really upset me. Possibly more than Joe Biden, because I actually hold Trump in relatively good esteem. And I know Biden's a hack. So, I just complain about it. But anyway, guys, stay tuned for the next one. Thanks again for watching. Later.